In a realm inhabited by both ordinary people and practitioners of Taoist arts, the world was thrown into turmoil as humans and monsters struggled to inhabit the same space, their uneasy coexistence shaping a realm defined by chaos. The Sun-In existed with a single purpose: to hunt down the ruthless creatures and formidable monsters that were unfit to dwell among humans. They were able to carry others to distant realms, such as the Sky Realm, the mystical domain of the Taoists, or even the shadowy depths of the underworld. Sun-In and the others belonged to the ranks of demigods, existing somewhere between mortals and true deities, rather than fitting the strict human definitions of gods or immortals. One afternoon, a mysterious being soared through the clouds while riding atop a majestic winged animal. As they glided along, the creature let out a weary breath, silently questioning whether their upcoming assignment would involve confronting yet another emoji. The writer responded by explaining that this situation was unusual because he had learned the mission involved the snake tribe. The setting took place in a small village known as Yule. The tale unfolds around the life of this village. On a certain day, villagers encircled it with a blessed rope. Because the famine had drained the people's strength, a few among them ventured across the rope and disappeared into the mountains, hoping to find something to eat. None of them survived their journey. Every single one met their end without ever coming back. There was just a single girl who stood apart from the rest. The villagers typically despised this girl. She realized she was now the focus of their deadly intentions, sensing clearly that their urge to end her life was real and not just a trick of her mind. A small crowd of villagers formed a circle around her. One of the women turned to her and, with suspicion in her eyes, demanded to know whether she was the sister responsible for the villagers' deaths. The girl let out a calm sigh and, with a hint of sarcasm, questioned whether the men had nothing better to do. Her words provoked one of the men, who lost his temper and yelled in her face, accusing her of being a deadly. The girl explained that the villagers' actions made sense from their point of view. In a village where hunger was widespread, it was only natural for desperate people to consider seizing food from those who possessed it. Among the villagers, a man called sensed that something was unusual. She listed several of the deceased, such as Mr. and clarified that each of them had crossed the sacred rope and lost their lives as a result. She found it odd that this girl was the sole survivor, questioning in her mind how such a thing could have happened. The girl attempted to diffuse the tension by suggesting that simply request something to eat if she was hungry, rather than stirring up conflict. In response, insisted that the girl needed to come to her senses, persisted with her claims, pointing out that the girl had managed to come back unharmed after crossing beyond the sacred rope. This could only mean two possibilities. She was either a herself or she supported the monsters. The girl responded in a chilly tone, making it clear she had no knowledge of that. She eyed the stones and sticks in their hands, questioning silently whether they believed those simple objects could stand a chance against her. After being labeled a deadly by others, she carried the weight of their accusations. Just then, a golden light shined in her eyes. She confessed her hidden ability, explaining that whenever she gazed into someone's eyes, their thoughts would become clear to her. As Bari's eyes began to shine, the villagers recoiled in fear. Their minds, now open to her, overflowed with panic and suspicion. The intensity of her stare unsettled them deeply, filling their hearts with dread. Whispered doubts spread among them, questioning if Bari might truly be a. Bari recognized the fear in their eyes and came to understand the reason behind it. She admitted to herself that, if their roles were reversed, she would have been just as terrified to encounter someone like her. Despite the threat, she dared them to make a move against her. Bari made it clear that she refused to remain passive and endure the attacks without responding. She depended on her talent for listening to the thoughts of others. She effortlessly avoided every blow they aimed at her, moving with remarkable agility. She anticipated each action before it even occurred. Despite the odds, she succeeded in defeating every opponent, sending each one tumbling to the floor. They cried out, their voices filled with agony. The villagers were stunned as memories from their childhood resurfaced. It dawned on them that Bari could be the most powerful person in their village, and they recalled how, when they were young, none of them had ever managed to land a single blow on her. This caused one of them to wish they had never crossed her path. Bari positioned herself before a villager who was sprawled on the earth, trembling with fear as he questioned her about who she really was. The others found themselves torn between fear and a peculiar sense of respect, as one among them became convinced that she was truly a. The girl searched for an explanation, but struggled to gather enough words to make her circumstances clear, gazed at the spectacle unfolding in front of her, captivated by the events, and silently wished for the girl's defeat. From behind the girl, someone else emerged and unexpectedly swung a heavy rock at her, attempting to strike her. At the very last second, the girl dodged the strike and escaped harm. The struggle went on for several more seconds. During this time, the villager who had tried to strike her accused her of being a cunning, reacting reacting to the way she avoided his blow and let her stick fall to the ground. The man lunged at her with his fist, shouting desperately that someone should end her life. She struck him in the face with a fierce and forceful kick. He collapsed to the floor, knocked out cold. It was then that she understood just how desperate these people were for food. Bari turned her back on the group and left, while one of them shouted after her from afar, hurling insults and accusing her of being a deadly. She continued along the path, her mind occupied with thoughts of the village's hardships as she observed the empty fields and watched villagers struggle to farm the infertile ground. After careful thought, she realized that things in the village had spiraled out of control, convincing her that she needed to escape immediately before any serious trouble occurred. Although she longed deeply to leave that wretched village behind, she found herself unable to go. The cause of this was her mother, who happened to be the village's sole shaman. The villagers never accepted her mother as a genuine shaman, choosing instead to ridicule her. Bari questioned whether her work held any worth, especially since it brought in no income while everyone else focused on making a living. Inside her home, Bari sat deep in thought, puzzled by the mystery of her survival as the sole person to return from the perilous mountains. She acknowledged internally that the situation was certainly odd, and the true issue was her own inability to explain it. She carefully sliced through the fresh herbs. She questioned what set her apart from everyone else. Perhaps it was her unusual talent for hearing others' thoughts, but a more unsettling idea crept in. Maybe the real reason was that she wasn't human at all. Lost in her thoughts, she accidentally sliced her finger with the knife. Her mother hurried over, fear gripping her as she noticed the blood. Despite Bari's efforts to comfort her, the reassurance did not fully reach her. The mother firmly declared her intention to handle the meal preparation herself and reached over to take the knife out of her daughter's hands. Hoping to ease her mother's worries and shift the conversation, Bari confidently displayed a sizable pheasant she had managed to catch. Contrary to what anyone might have predicted, the mother reacted with fear. Discovering that her daughter had returned to the mountain filled her with dread. The mother chastised her daughter, cautioning her about the perils lurking on the mountain. Bari assured everyone that she felt all right and emphasized the importance of eating to avoid going hungry. Their heated discussion came to an abrupt halt when a furious voice suddenly yelled from outside. The mother of the boy who had earlier clashed with Bari appeared on the scene. The boy felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him and, struggling to find his voice, turned to his mother with a request. He wanted her to tell Bari and her mother to leave the village. However, his mother counseled patience, suggesting that he should give it some time before taking any action. The mother raised her voice, blaming Bari for attacking her son. Bari shot back with a sarcastic remark, inwardly questioning whether his son appeared so feeble that someone like her might actually be able to overpower him. She started to tap into her power to hear the thoughts of others. She listened in on the mind of a starving woman who was scheming to seize food through forceful means. He inquired directly about whether she was hungry, leaving the woman feeling puzzled. Bari harbored resentment toward the villagers, frustrated by their constant reliance on violence and force rather than simply making polite requests. The woman shouted at Bari, accusing her of being then rushed forward and tried to slap her. Bari's mother stepped in, hoping to put a stop to what was happening. She extended the basket of food toward the hostile woman in an attempt to soothe her agitation. Bari felt a wave of sorrow wash over her. The woman took the offered food, yet insisted that Bari demonstrate she was not a. In response, Bari stated firmly that it was the responsibility of the accuser to present evidence. The woman replied by pointing out that Bari's status as the sole survivor from the mountain served as sufficient evidence. Bari, her voice heavy with exhaustion, informed the boy's mother that it was time for her to go since she had already gotten what she wanted. In response, the mother erupted with fury, demanding that Bari remove her hand and accusing her of overstepping her boundaries. Without warning, a villager burst onto the scene, yelling and cutting through the tension. News quickly spread through the crowd that a messenger from the palace had arrived, bringing with him the hope of rescue. Rumors about a hunter's arrival swept swiftly through the village, and when Bari learned of it, anxiety became evident on her face. Rumors spread among the villagers as they discussed the enigmatic stranger. Some claimed he was no ordinary man, revealing that he was actually a member of a hidden group connected to the palace. The others were taken aback, astonished that anyone from the royal palace would journey all the way to their distant village. Their disbelief grew even stronger when they learned that the visitor had come alone. As one of the villagers led him along the path, the villager respectfully addressed him as Your Highness. Bari observed as the attractive man walked toward the group. At that instant, the very first thought that entered Bari's mind emerged. There was a possibility that this individual was not actually human. The woman who had previously blamed Bari wasted no time. She shoved the girl in the hunter's direction and loudly declared her to be the. The hunter glanced in Bari's direction, seeking confirmation of who she was. As he pondered in silence, he couldn't understand why people labeled her a monster when, to him, she appeared just like any other person. At that instant, a yellow light shone from Bari's eyes. The hunter quickly understood that she had somehow known what he was thinking, and he raised his voice to question whether she possessed the ability to read minds. Bari froze in disbelief at the unexpected question. He replied by posing his own question. question, wondering whether the other person was truly human. The hunter felt a wave of confusion, and the same uncertainty spread among the villagers. Without making a sound, he projected a silent message into Bari's mind, hinting that each of them carried hidden truths, and that it would be best to set the issue aside for the time being. Bari, stunned by the revelation, suddenly understood that he had prior knowledge of her power, and had intentionally reached out to her, causing her to grow even more wary of who he really was. Following the incident, the hunter acted as though he didn't know anything when he faced the villagers, questioning them about the source of their anger and inquiring about the meaning of the term mind reader. A villager approached and questioned him, wanting to know whether Bari should be considered a monster. The hunter confidently asserted that the woman before him was indeed a human being. The villagers, still doubtful of his claims, were taken aback by what happened. Bari stood in disbelief, astonished by the realization that she was not the monster she had always feared she might be. Once everything had been resolved, the hunter known as disclosed his real purpose for coming, sharing that he had come across a manuscript which mentioned a snake residing in the village. He proceeded to question the villagers, wanting to know whether anyone had captured or consumed an oddly shaped snake, or observed anyone beginning to behave in a serpentine manner. A villager with evident anxiety revealed that someone matching the description did exist among them. The setting transitioned to the headquarters, where the village mayor conducted official matters. At the scene, the mayor, who was Wu's father, approached the hunter with anger, demanding an explanation for his unexpected visit, stepped forward, announcing his role as a hunter of, and revealed an official decree from the royal court. Once the villager quietly informed the mayor that the guest had come from the palace, the mayor's demeanor shifted at once, and he welcomed the visitor inside. The mayor questions reasons for wanting to visit his son, attempting to stop him by explaining that the boy was gravely sick, and there was a risk the sickness could spread. Paid no attention to the urgent cautions, and walked straight toward the son's room, showing no concern for the mayor's frantic efforts to prevent him from opening the door. As pushed the door open, inside he saw the mayor's wife holding her trembling son, Wu, close in her arms as the boy suffered in discomfort. Concerned, Wu's mother questioned her son's presence there and pleaded with him to return with her so he could be safe and warm again. Wu clung to his mother with desperate arms, his cries filled with longing as he pleaded for her milk. The childish insistence stunned his mother, leaving her bewildered as she tried to understand how he could still be hungry. Wu spotted standing at the doorway and found himself curious about the stranger's identity, and the others stared in shock as Wu's tongue flicked and twisted, moving with a serpent-like agility that left them speechless. Instructed the group to exit the room, allowing only the young master to remain. The mayor's anger flared as he voiced his objections, unwilling to rely on someone he didn't know and determined not to abandon his residence. Responded in a composed manner, noting the significant changes in his son, which rendered the mayor unable to respond. He assured everyone that he would restore his son to how he used to be and once again asked for permission to leave. However, Wu shouted in protest, desperately insisting that his mother shouldn't go. The mayor, filled with desperation, questioned whether his son would truly become himself again, assured him that he would, but explained that they would only be certain once he attempted the process. The mayor, having been persuaded, chose to depart alongside his wife and the rest of the group. As he pulled his hesitant wife along, their son pleaded with her to stay, his voice filled with hunger and desperation. The mayor forced everyone to leave and commanded that they keep their distance. The door shut tightly, muffling Wu's desperate cries. Bari hesitated at the threshold, preparing to depart as well, reached out and caught her by the arm, insisting that she remain where she was. This unexpected action left her startled and curious about his reasons, instructed her to shut the door firmly, making sure it was secure enough to keep others from coming inside. Bari did as she was told, grumbling under her breath. Bari did as she was told, grumbling under her breath and inwardly questioning with a hint of sarcasm. Wu, his voice trembling with fear, could be heard from within the room as he pleaded for his mother and admitted how much frightened him. Approached the chained boy, who desperately tried to break free and shouted his dislike for while attempting to climb out the window. Responded with an icy tone, making it clear he wasn't fond of the other person. Without waiting for a response, he brushed him off with a curt question about what would happen next, then struck him with such force that the man lost consciousness. Bari's breath caught as she stared in disbelief at what lay before her. She yelled at him, demanding to know whether he had lost his mind and what his intentions were. Calmly answered that he had rendered the man unconscious. Bari was confused and wondered if he had really sent everyone away just for that reason. Sharply told her to stop making ridiculous comments. Then he crouched next to the unconscious and requested that Bari use to examine him. Bari, confused by the unfamiliar term, asked to say it in words she could comprehend, disclosed Bari's identity and instructed her to examine the boy's memories. Bari, clearly puzzled, explained that she was incapable of doing such a thing and admitted that the term was completely unfamiliar to her, clarified that people referred to this power as telepathy. At that instant, a yellow light shone in Bari's eyes as, filled with anger, faced her, and insisted she ought to have gotten his consent before using her powers on him. Bari, taken aback by his insight, wondered aloud how he had come to that realization, and whether he was able to perceive anything unusual. Reached out and gently pressed his finger to her forehead. At that moment, a luminous golden mark began to shine where he had touched her. His eyes shone with a bright blue light as he disclosed that each instance Bari activated her power. The symbol became visible on her forehead to him. Noticed that she was shocked by what she had just learned, so he encouraged her to attempt using on the boy. Bari cried out in frustration, desperately trying to make it clear that she had already explained her inability to read memories. She started recalling the very first occasion when it occurred. During her childhood, there was a night when her mother gently stroked her hair as she slept, and with a playful tone, inquired about the dreams that filled her mind. At that instant, as her mother's hand made contact with her head, the sensation lingered. Her mind was unexpectedly flooded with recollections from her mother. In those recollections, Bari witnessed a person instructing her mother, Song Ha, that she was responsible for bringing up the child. From that moment forward, she assumed the role of his mother. Curled up beneath her blankets, young Bari shivered as she tried to make sense of the sights that had just unfolded before her. She looked at her mother in disbelief, wondering if her mother had found her somewhere and brought her home. Starting from that moment, Bari came to understand that her mother was not the one who had brought her into the world. Broke her train of thought, wondering aloud if she had recalled anything. Bari explained that the events of the past were merely accidental, yet questioned her with a hint of sarcasm, wondering if that same accident was the reason she could now wield. Bari's temper ignited as she lashed out, convinced that he was deliberately provoking her to determine whether she could control her power at that moment. Her eyes shimmered with a yellow light as she accused him of being out of his mind, revealed that, up until this mission, he had never crossed paths with a human before. Bari gazed around, filled with awe, as she questioned whether others like herself existed in the world. Acknowledged that they were real, Bari took a deep breath to steady herself, then assured him that she was willing to give it a try. Tears gathered in her eyes as she set a condition. She would attempt to use, but if she managed to do so, he would be required to respond to every question she had. Observed the sadness in her expression and questioned the reason for her tears, but she insisted nothing was wrong. Assured her that he would fulfill what she asked and pleaded with her to stop her tears. Bari claimed she was not in tears. Instead, she explained that she was simply caught off guard. Demonstrated the proper technique, instructing her to rest her hand gently on the man's skin and concentrate on understanding the reasons behind his current condition. Bari gave a silent nod and gently rested her hand on Wu's shoulder. She focused her thoughts, silently questioning what could have caused the young master's condition, which in turn made the mark on her forehead start to shine once more. Bari journeyed back in time to witness Wu's earlier days. She noticed him sipping from an oversized bowl, muttering complaints about an unpleasant odor. Right after that, a wave of dizziness washed over the boy, and an intense thirst gripped him. The character reached for the teapot and drank the water from it with obvious enthusiasm. His eyes burned a vivid red while he cried out desperately, demanding additional water. He became so thirsty that he walked over to the well and drank straight from it. Within her vision, Bari witnessed a maid overcome by fear, her screams echoing in terror. Wu lunged toward the maid, trying to snatch the bucket from her grasp. Concerned, the maid looked at him and asked if he was all right, but he only yelled at her, demanding that she leave him alone. At that instant, Wu caught a whiff of the unpleasant scent of medicine drifting out from a small hut situated beside the well. The setting changed to the hut, where two servants expressed their revulsion as they discussed the foul odor wafting from several jars that contained writhing snakes. They looked at it with clear revulsion. Bari overheard someone mention that young Master Wu's health had declined significantly. This news filled the Wu within the vision with dread, causing him to anxiously question whether the food he was eating might actually be snake. Driven by doubt, he made his way to the area where the jars had been kept. As he lifted the lid of one box, surprise washed over him at the sight of several snakes coiled within. Wu glanced about and noticed the room overflowing with jars. He noticed that everyone had made arrangements specifically for his arrival. He realized that this was the remedy he had been consuming. Gripped by overwhelming fear and remorse, he drifted deep into his thoughts, silently questioning his father about the food he had been given. Overwhelmed by hopelessness, he accidentally let one of the jars slip from his grasp. By mistake, the storeroom caught fire. Within the flickering firelight, he glimpsed the charred remnants of an enormous serpent's form. The household staff hurried to the site where the mishap had occurred. When Wu was discovered surrounded by flames, the others immediately shouted for assistance and rushed to extinguish the blaze. Wu's mind was consumed by the realization that his father had carried out such a terrible deed solely for his sake. He realized that everything happening was a result of his own continued existence. The scene changed, showing Wu lying unconscious as the snake's spirit manifested nearby. Wu offered an apology to the snake spirit. He presented his weak body, silently inviting the creature to claim it if that was its desire. The spirit appeared to silently question question whether he truly meant what he said. The creature suddenly unleashed an ear-splitting, fearsome roar. The snake spirit slipped into Wu, taking over his body. Without warning, the vision ended abruptly, leaving Bari to collapse backward in sheer exhaustion. Reached out just in time to steady her, his concern clear as he checked to make sure she wasn't hurt. Bari, stunned and wide-eyed, revealed that the young master had willingly given himself to the snake spirit. Surprise grew when he discovered that Wu had chosen to give himself up, acting out of his own free will. Feelings of guilt lingered, and the realization that Wu had made this sacrifice on purpose left him even more taken aback. Bari, filled with worry, questioned whether this news meant the young master had passed away. Answered Bari's question by saying the truth would be revealed shortly. After that, he pulled out a small, whip-like weapon and directed his attention toward. A slender, pale strand slipped out from his weapon, winding its way forward with the fluid motion of a serpent. Bari felt confused as she tried to decide whether she was looking at a simple piece of thread or an actual snake. The thread shot toward Wu's motionless form and sank its teeth into him, causing a cry of agony to escape from the boy. Demanded that the being controlling Wu's body reveal itself. The force insisted that the creature shatter its restraints and go back to its rightful place. A surge of swirling blue and black energy burst out from the boy's body with intense force. A shadowy apparition took shape, its anguished cries echoing as it was forcefully drawn away. Swung his radiant weapon at the spirit, landing a powerful blow. Once more, the creature let out a piercing scream as it was drawn toward his weapon. Once the spirit was gone, the white thread known as had named it reappeared, acknowledged its efforts, offering it words of praise for a job well done. Bari gazed at the unfolding events with wide-eyed astonishment, her mind racing with questions about its identity and pondering if he might actually be a soul reaper or something similar. Instructed to step away from the young master, causing the white thread to retreat. As it did, Wu gradually started to wake up. Checked on Wu's well-being, concern clear in his eyes. Wu glanced around the area and spotted Bari. Doubtful, he questioned her identity, but Bari confirmed that she was indeed who he thought she was. He shifted his attention toward, wanting to know the stranger's identity. Chose not to answer and instead reached into a pouch, retrieving a tiny blue crystal that shimmered with light. He handed the crystal to Wu, silently instructing him to accept it. The person approached him to let him know that another individual wished to speak with him. The moment Wu's fingers brushed against the crystal, a tiny spirit specter took shape in front of him. It looked like a child, but its lower half twisted into a snake's tail. The spirit called out to Wu, addressing him as its big brother. At the same time, a curious cat observed everything happening from its spot outside. Wu wrapped his arms gently around the small snake spirit, holding it close. Fell to the ground, tears streaming down his face as he repeatedly begged the spirit for forgiveness. Spotting the small spirit nearby, Bari stared in disbelief, questioning whether truly had the ability to see ghosts. Clarified that possessed the ability to communicate with spirits, despite their invisibility to others, and he brought up the memory of the snake spirit that Bari had previously encountered. The small spirit gently informed Wu that his real name was Dong, not my child. He went on to share how much pain and sadness he had felt at the time of his death, but added that Wu, whom he called his big brother, had allowed him to borrow his body. Wu remembered how his mother had always shown great kindness to him, and because of her gentle treatment, much of the bitterness he once felt had faded away. Wu was overcome with guilt, believing his actions could not be excused, and he expressed a heartfelt apology to Dong for what had occurred. Spirit observed that his true mother remained sorrowful, yet her resilience shone through. She then faced, remarking on his strength. He inquired whether it was possible for his mother to join him at his current location. Appeared bewildered as he responded to the spirit, admitting his uncertainty. He clarified that if the spirit's mother had passed away, she would require guidance to reach the afterlife. However, if she had caused the deaths of others, she would be required to confront judgment before moving on. When the spirit heard the mention of judgment, a wave of fear and sorrow washed over it, prompting the spirit to softly murmur its mother's name. Spirit suddenly broke into sorrowful sobs, which led Wu to scold, blaming him for causing the child such distress. Felt a jolt of surprise as he questioned whether he had truly been the cause of the boy's tears, while Wu gently attempted to comfort the small spirit. Maintained his honesty about the situation, declaring with conviction that the rules of the afterlife could never be broken. This unwavering stance caused tears to flow even harder. Ultimately, overwhelmed by frustration, relented and assured the spirit that he would help its mother in any way he could, pleading desperately for the spirit's sobs to cease. The spirit quickly wiped away its tears and looked at with hope, wanting to know if he was sincere. Reassured the spirit that he would try his hardest to help, even though he wasn't sure it would make a difference. The small spirit expressed its gratitude to him and embraced him with genuine warmth. Gently pointed out the mistake, explaining that it should refer to him as brother instead of sir. Grew curious after hearing the exchange, and wondered aloud if Dong might be older than he appeared, especially since Dong had addressed Wu as Big Brother, which took by surprise. The little spirit couldn't understand what was being asked and felt puzzled. It confessed its total confusion about the situation. The weary spirit prepared to depart for the night, murmuring a farewell, but before it could vanish, intervened and prevented its exit. The spirit flowed back into the blue crystal that Wu was holding, while observed that the creature must have survived for 2 or 3 decades. Bari realized, based on what had said, that the spirit's great age meant had likely been alive for over 100 years. Then wondered aloud about the reason behind Bari's interest. She claimed she wasn't especially interested, yet explained that her mother's background as a shaman had given her a sharp intuition about such matters. Bari caught off guard by asking him directly if he was a psychopomp, a guide for spirits, which left him stunned. Burst into laughter at the conclusion Bari had made, while Bari quietly decided it was best if never found out how she had come to that idea. With a teasing tone, pretended to doubt her interest in him, suggesting he believed she wasn't actually curious about him at all. Previously, she had shown little curiosity, but her attention was now clearly piqued. Wu eagerly entered the discussion, expressing his own curiosity, which made Bari acknowledge that she, too, felt a bit inquisitive. Gave her a warm smile and explained that, at times, not knowing everything could actually bring happiness. At that instant, Bari focused intently, attempting to sense what he was thinking, and a luminous symbol emerged on her forehead. Reprimanded Bari, insisting she cease her actions. Frustrated that he noticed her efforts, Bari resolved that if he refused to speak, she would investigate on her own. Cautioned her once more, emphasizing that his words were meant for her benefit. Red light flickered in his eyes while he told her that, under normal circumstances, humans who uncovered his real identity would have their memories wiped clean. In order to support his claim, he revealed a golden talisman. He instructed her to let go of her memories, clarifying that the talisman possessed the power to consume any recollection she held of him. Bari's fear was obvious as he tried to find out what the talisman meant. Explained to her that he possessed the power to wipe all of her memories away with just a single command. He seized Wu with a firm grip and pushed the talisman firmly onto Wu's forehead. He informed him that within an hour, he would awaken with no recollection of him remaining. Bari's fear overwhelmed her, causing her to let out a scream as she desperately pleaded, declaring that her curiosity had vanished and her terror was so intense that it left her struggling to catch her breath. Dropped his charming demeanor as he walked toward Bari. He proposed that, since her curiosity seemed so intense, she should join him as his companion, promising to reveal everything about himself if she agreed. Bari realized from the way he used the word companion that he expected her to be his follower. Bari wasted no time in dismissing the suggestion, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she questioned whether he was out of his mind to believe she would ever join a hunt, firmly declaring she wouldn't survive even one day in such a dangerous job. In response, clarified that facing the would be his responsibility, reassuring her that she would have a separate role altogether. Bari swiftly shifted the conversation, bringing up his earlier vow to explain more about other mind readers and her own power to glimpse the past, and insisted that he begin discussing it. His uncertainty became clear when he caught sight of a figure standing beyond the window. He hurried toward the exit, yet Bari blocked his way and firmly reminded him of the promise he had made. Bari explained how much this situation mattered to her, since she had spent her entire life feeling like a monster. Without warning, a vivid pink light began to shine from his eyes as he activated a special power known as Thousand Mile Eye. A massive black bird suddenly emerged in the sky, darted behind the bird, hastening his steps as he closed in on it. Bari ran after him, her shouts filling the air as she pleaded for him to slow down. She yelled at him, insisting that he couldn't run away and that he needed to honor his commitment. Kept his distance, causing Bari's frustration to grow until she muttered under her breath that he was being foolish. Turned and called for a blue cat nearby. The object started to shift, growing larger as it took the shape of a massive, winged beast soaring through the air. Bari's eyes widened in disbelief at the sight before her, and the shock overwhelmed her so completely that her legs gave out, sending her crashing down to the ground. Gazing toward the heavens, she found herself curious about the enormous bird soaring above. At the same time, glided high above the ground, riding atop, a dragon-shaped beast with powerful wings, sprinted after a massive, soaring through the sky, raised his voice, insisting that they come to a halt. The two opponents met mid-air, their conflict erupting above the ground. Realized that the confined space made it difficult to maneuver during the battle. Muttered her frustrations about what was happening, and explained to him that the belonged to the type. Made up his mind to complete the task on his own. Sprang upward, skillfully wielding his serpentine weapon as he soared through the air, moved swiftly toward the airborne, catching it off guard with how quickly he managed to close the distance. Unleashed an attack that took the form of a snake, darting toward the target with incredible speed. The whip, moving with the agility of a serpent, curled tightly around the plume-covered tail. The lash ripped through the plumage, drawing a piercing cry of pain from the creature. The vanquished tumbled down from the clouds, scattering just a handful of feathers in its wake, darted forward with swift movements, and came down directly on top of the. He aimed his weapon at the throat, causing the frightened creature to shake uncontrollably. Inquired about what it was. The eyes widened in surprise as it noticed its weapon, its surface ablaze with a bright yellow fire, and questioned inwardly if this could possibly be the legendary snake-binding rope. Faced off against the airborne, who visibly shook with terror when he noticed the radiant yellow flames blazing from its weapon. Curious and determined, demanded to know how the creature had learned about the weapon. The erupted in uncontrollable laughter, making it clear that he recognized him intimately. The stared in disbelief, questioning whether the rope before them was truly the legendary snake-binding rope. With a tone of reverence, the revealed that this weapon was indeed the sacred rope, said to be bound to the spirit of a snake. He went on, gesturing toward the spirit that sat astride another. Prior to directing his question to about being the spirit lion, he eagerly affirmed that the figure in front of him truly was the spirit lion. His expression showed his bewilderment as he silently questioned who this mysterious being could be. The confronted him boldly, demanding to know how it would react now that the truth of its identity had been revealed. In an unexpected turn, this attitude shifted dramatically as he started to root for the spirit lion with genuine excitement, openly showing how much he cared for him. Lashed out at the stranger in a fit of anger, his mind swirling with questions about who this person was and what business he had watching the spirit lion. The odd behavior of the newcomer led to silently conclude that this individual must be out of his mind. The revealed his name was, and explained that he belonged to the bird tribe. Addressing respectfully as Master Lion, clarified that was not the individual he had been searching for. When it became clear to that his true objective was the temple, he stood in stunned silence, quietly echoing the temple's name as he tried to make sense of the revelation. At the same time, Bari found herself trapped in the sorrowful recollections of her younger years. Thoughts of her grandmother shielding her and forcing the women who upset her to leave replayed in her mind. At that moment, she understood that letting her tears fall was the only way she could endure the difficulties she faced. However, once her grandmother passed away, nothing remained the same. She recalled how the villagers used to murmur that her grandmother, the shaman, had lost her life in an attempt to protect her. She had taken in a child without understanding the child's real identity, and even the shaman remained blind to her own destiny. Following her mother's passing, Bari came to understand that she had no one remaining who could shield her from harm. Following 6 months of hardship, she and her mother were gradually wasting away from hunger. One day, Bari discovered a collection of food set out on the snowy ground. Among the offerings were a pheasant, a rabbit, several pieces of fruit, and some potatoes. She spotted some bird tracks beside the scattered food. As she lifted her gaze toward the sky, she noticed birds soaring overhead. Believing her grandmother had come back as a bird to rescue her, she reached out in tears, calling desperately for help. While she enjoyed her food, she thought to herself that it was the coziest and tastiest meal she had ever experienced. She solemnly promised herself, she made a silent vow to herself, that tears would never fall from her eyes again. She was willing to collect branches that had already fallen to the ground, rather than cut wood herself. She was determined to endure, regardless of the obstacles she faced. That day, however, she sensed that all her resolve had lost its purpose. She had shed tears countless times before. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she made her way home, her thoughts swirling with the realization that she was not the only mind reader in the world. As Bari strolled along, her mind replayed S's vow to reveal everything she wanted to know, provided she used her power to glimpse into the past. While she made her way back to the house, Bari secretly wished that would not return, imagining how she could then enjoy all the food the woman had given them without having to share. Bari felt a jolt of surprise when unexpectedly appeared before her, questioning the reason for her delayed return. She looked at him with a puzzled expression, questioning his presence, while responded with composure, expressing curiosity about what might possibly keep him away. He brought up the deal they had made, and with a mocking tone, questioned whether she believed he was the type of person who would go back on his word and disappear. Bari shouted furiously at him, upset that he had vanished without warning and soared into the sky, making it clear how frightened the experience had left her. Glanced her way, a mischievous grin spreading across his face, and wondered aloud if she might have been let down by his sudden absence. Bari, clearly bewildered, refused the accusation and tried to explain his surprise by recalling how he had vowed to respond to each of her questions, only to abruptly take off into the sky moments later. Eyed her with suspicion, just as as Bari's mother stepped outside and noticed the two of them, curiosity flickering across her face as she tried to figure out what was going on. Walked over to stand beside, and together they examined the assortment of food that Bari had set out for them, discovered the wine nestled among the food, and burst out with enthusiasm. It had been ages since he last encountered such a drink, and he immediately started gulping it down with great eagerness. Meanwhile, Bari stared at him in disbelief, silently questioning whether he might actually be some kind of monster. Admitted to her that her suspicions were correct, revealing that he truly was a monster known as a In, a being that was part bird. When In heard these words, he began to question within himself whether he might not be entirely human either. In that instant, fear overwhelmed Bari as she became aware that a creature had invaded her house, and as she processed this realization, a golden symbol formed on her forehead. Without warning, faced Bari and requested that she avoid using her mind-reading powers on him. He explained that experiencing someone else's intrusion into his thoughts felt awful. Bari was caught off guard by this, realizing that could sense when she used her ability. Glanced at Bari and insisted that he was not responsible for exposing her identity too. Eagerly sipped her wine, then extended the bottle toward Bari, inviting her to share in the drink. Bari reacted with surprise, wondering aloud how the man could possibly know her name. The man explained that he was familiar with everyone in the village. He went on to mention that his curiosity was especially piqued by those who lived in this particular house. Bari, puzzled, questioned his reasons for this special interest. He shared that Song Ha, her mother, once placed a jug of wine on the rooftop for him each night when the moon was full, but lately she had stopped this tradition because life had become more difficult. Bari's mother explained that she kept up the tradition because her own mother had instructed her to do so, expressed admiration for Song Ha, noting that she was an exceptional shaman who always looked after the people of Yule village. He went on to tell Bari that during her childhood, he had been the one responsible for catching pheasants and rabbits for her, all as a gesture of gratitude for her mother's generosity. He wondered aloud whether she could recall that moment. At that instant, Bari understood that the bird tracks she had previously noticed near the food belonged to him. His booming laughter made it clear that her suspicion was correct. Bari, filled with regret, expressed her apologies to him upon realizing her mistake. Saddened, she reflected that her rescuer had not been her grandmother as she once believed. She inwardly reproached herself, questioning how someone who had suffered a lifetime of ridicule for being called a monster could have acted so unkindly toward the very creature that had come to her rescue. She silently berated herself for being so foolish while observing the group. Broke into Bari's thoughts, brushing it off as unimportant. He explained that, considering how much food he had received from Bari's mother, helping out was the least he could offer in return. Although hesitant, Bari conceded and confessed that she had behaved quite rudely when they first met. She used the Korean word to describe her actions, but this led to confusion, misheard, and assumed she was addressing. Startled, he called out, which caught both and Bari off guard. Burst into laughter, remarking to Bari that she found her use of the word unusual and amusing. She went on to reassure Bari that a touch of rudeness between them was perfectly acceptable. Interrupted with frustration, insisting that should no longer use his name to mean rude, and clarified that it upset him whenever he heard it. His expression revealed her confusion as she questioned whether his name was truly. However, let out a weary sigh, choosing not to address the mix-up and instead encouraged everyone to carry on with their discussion. Attempted to steer the conversation in a different direction by looking at Bari and reminding him of his earlier comment about how people dislike monsters. This behavior came naturally, guided by instinct. Went on to say that facing these struggles was just a part of life for people who stood out like they did. Before could finish, cut him off and asked straight out about the reason behind putting sacred ropes at each entrance to the mountain. Feeling overwhelmed, confessed that he had acted on the orders of the mountain god. Bari's mother gasped with astonishment when she heard the mountain god being mentioned, glanced over at and revealed that he understood what had occurred, leaving confused as she tried to figure out how had learned about the situation. Observed that the feathers attached to the sacred rope matched perfectly, leading him to suspect her involvement. Acting on this hunch, he set a trap and unwittingly walked right into it. Without warning, pulled out a knife and aimed it directly at. He insisted that the other person reveal the truth and stop avoiding the question. Let out a terrified scream, insisting that he was only doing what he had been told. Bari's mother rose to her feet, frustration simmering within her as she questioned why the mountain god chose to address the others rather than herself. Raised her voice and explained to her that if someone from the village had died beyond the protection of the sacred rope, the other villagers would never have spared. She emphasized that everyone was already watching closely, eager to find any excuse to hold and Bari responsible. Kept crying out desperately, pleading for mercy and demanding to be left in peace. He repeatedly claimed that his actions were only carried out because the mountain god had commanded him. Bari's mother, her voice steady, questioned why he hadn't informed her about the situation. In response, explained that he was unsure of the specifics himself and wished to confront the mountain god to understand the reason behind being assigned such a bothersome duty. The mountain god constantly shouted at him, demanding he place sacred ropes at each entrance to the the mountain and relentlessly bothered him with these orders. Without warning, a mysterious voice echoed around, explaining that the chaos was his own doing, since he paid attention only when people raised their voices. Without warning, a tiny divine spirit materialized, leaving Bari's mother in shock. Curious, inquired whether the newcomer was truly a divine spirit. In response, the spirit playfully questioned, wondering aloud if he had never encountered an adorable divine spirit like herself before. The spirit looked over, and the spirit that accompanied him she shared her deep respect for, portraying him as an awe-inspiring dragon cloaked in shadows. The spirit concluded that was acting as a messenger between worlds, and this realization led to understand her true nature as a divine spirit. Questioned the reason behind her decision to arrange the placement of the sacred ropes while stood before her, shaking with fear. The spirit explained that the rope served as a caution, meant to keep people from venturing into the mountains. Bari's mother wondered aloud why her daughter hadn't spoken to her face-to-face, but the spirit clarified that sharing the truth openly would have allowed Bari to uncover every detail just by sensing her mother's thoughts. The spirit then disclosed that Bari had been unaware of the countless times she had narrowly escaped death while being shielded every time she crossed that rope. The spirit raised its voice toward Bari, demanding to know whether she realized how many times it had risked its own existence to keep her safe. Cut her off, pointing out that lacking a physical form meant she was incapable of dying, and suggested she claim she nearly vanished instead. This remark infuriated the spirit, who then warned that a true death was still possible. The spirit revealed that if Bari became aware of her protection, she would bravely visit the mountain each day, never feeling afraid, since she was exactly the kind of person who would follow through on such determination. As the spirit spoke Bari and focused on their food in silence, paying no attention to her presence, Bari ignored the divine spirit completely, and with a hint of sarcasm, questioned whether the spirit was once more speaking ill of her. The spirit remarked to Bari that her instincts were unusually keen, and that her troublesome talent for reading minds made it impossible for her to confide even in her own mother. The spirit went on, worrying that if this kept up, punishment from the gods would follow for revealing divine secrets, and silently hoped that Bari would marry soon so this issue would finally be resolved. At the same time, Bari questioned about the reason the spirit wanted them to put up the sacred rope, explained that the spirit intended the rope to serve as a caution, but it felt more like she was expressing that she had crossed the rope to shield them, risking her own existence and nearly disappearing because of it. Bari suddenly understood that she had managed to stay alive because the spirit had been watching over her the entire time. She was overwhelmed with gratitude and silently offered her thanks to the divine spirit. She lowered her head in a respectful bow, expressing regret for her earlier oversight and offering gratitude once more for being rescued, while the spirit simply watched her quietly without responding. A short while later, pointed out that she was facing the wrong way as she bowed. Bari glanced about bewildered, while the spirit let out a weary sigh and insisted she drop the subject, assuring her that gratitude was unnecessary. Suddenly spoke up, noting that everyone had eaten their fill, and wondered aloud if it was now time for them to find. The thought of setting out in the dead of night caught off guard, leaving her visibly surprised. The spirit yelled at, insisting that there was no room for complaints when lives were at stake, and scolded him for continuing to eat during such chaos, even warning that a slap awaited him if he didn't get moving. Decided to leave, instructing Bari and her mother to remain inside where it was safer. Before departing, he formed a protective energy shield around the house to guard them against wandering spirits. As an extra measure, he removed the tiny crystal earring from his ear and handed it over to Bari. He instructed her to grip the crystal firmly and silently hope for safety if danger ever arose, urging her to picture a round barrier forming around her for protection. He mentioned that, given her talent for glimpsing into the past, the task ought to be simple for her. As he turned to leave, he instructed her to use it just one time, and only if she truly found herself in danger. Prompted by the spirit's urgent summons, quickly followed after her, while Bari remained behind, bewildered by what had just happened. Bari questioned internally the reason he handed her the shield rather than keeping it for himself, especially since he was the one planning to face the monsters. While studying the crystal resting in her palm, she noticed its earring and realized it sparked a sense of recognition within her. Far away, hidden within the shadowy mountains, an enigmatic figure listened closely as its crows delivered their message. The entity became aware that the spirit messenger was approaching and chose to prepare a suitable greeting for its arrival. Hidden deep inside a shadowy cave, the mysterious being emerged, its shape entwined by a massive serpent. The creature seemed convinced that its intended gesture would fully express the emotions it held within. Far within the cave, the missing villagers could be seen sprawled across the floor, their moans of pain echoing through the darkness. As they traveled toward the mountain, the spirit, and soared together high above the ground, wondered aloud too about the villagers' reasons for calling Bari a monster, questioning whether they somehow detected Bari's mind-reading gift. Responded with a laugh, then clarified that Bari had been able to read minds ever since she was a baby. He mentioned that anyone who spent enough time around her would eventually notice there was something unusual about her, even if they were just regular people. Reflected for a moment and realized she had always had this unique ability, which explained why he had always found her presence unsettling. The spirit clarified that every human mind reader she had encountered among the wise appeared to be advanced in age. The spirit revealed that people who are born with the power to read minds tend to lose this gift when they are still very young. Typically, after around 3 years, this special ability fades away. The spirit raised its voice in frustration, insisting that Bari's suffering set her apart from the others and made her situation unusual. Agreed with this assessment, and chuckling, remarked that even Song Ha faced difficulties when Bari was a child. Song Ha and her grandmother recalled the times when they would gaze at baby Bari with astonishment, often remarking on how unusual the child seemed to them. The divine spirit went on to explain that it was understandable for others to struggle with Bari, since she was an unusual young woman who had spent her entire 19 years growing up in a quiet mountain village like this one. Without warning, called out as she spotted a faint, whitish shape appearing far off in the distance. The spirit instantly identified the object as and urged the group to make haste. As they drew nearer, recoiled at the stench that drifted out from the area, finding the odor deeply unpleasant. The spirit revealed that the figure before them was, who had once been a stunning snake spirit and was now known as the wife of the mountain god. Questioned whether she herself might be responsible for the deaths, and she struggled to understand how she could have moved at all while confined within the barrier. The spirit revealed that she had been trapped inside the barrier by someone else's doing. She raised her voice in frustration, insisting that she had repeatedly urged to handle the situation with his wife. He constantly insisted that catching her was impossible. The spirit responded with a sarcastic attitude about what was happening. However, the moment the spirit messenger appeared, she was immediately apprehended, realized that had personally delivered her to them, which meant they no longer needed to look for him. However, observed that the act had been carried out hastily, laid out his findings, highlighting how had attempted to force his wife into the cave, and then block the entrance with a barrier. However, because her body was too large, only part of her fit inside, leaving the rest exposed outside the cave. Seeing this, anxiously questioned in his mind whether it was even possible for them to approach the scene. She realized the barrier was made of solid material, so it didn't just keep out spirits but also stopped anything with a physical form. Reasoned that, since the barrier was tangible, they might be able to smash through it, especially since it appeared weak and breakable. Himself for battle and signaled to his companion, indicating his intention to strike. The black dragon descended swiftly from the clouds, catching in its powerful claws and lifting him far above the ground. Descended swiftly from the sky, his weapon aglow with a vibrant orange fire as he aimed for the barrier below. Driven by curiosity, they sought to challenge its strength. He slammed into the barrier, unleashing a burst of flames, and followed up with an even more powerful blow. Just as he raised his weapon for a third strike, someone shouted for him to halt, and an unexpected barrier of energy sprang up to intercept his assault. Suddenly, an unexpected figure emerged, prompting to remark that the individual had at last chosen to reveal his presence. The figure standing before them was none other than the revered deity of the mountain.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole, spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork, and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Webtoon Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.